We're still going to use the microphones because we are live streaming. We're live streaming this. We'll see.
I guess I should keep this at a distance.
Yeah,
Seems pretty loud.
I think this one I have to get really close to. Let me just check this once.
Uh-huh.
So, you want to kind of say that? No? Doesn't matter? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Ben Hickey. I'm the curator of exhibitions at the Hilliard Art Museum. You might know me from other creative conversations, but tonight we're celebrating the art and creative life of Brian Schneider. His exhibition, Be Still, will be on view through much of July. And so, in lieu of a very formal introduction, I wanted to share with you how rewarding this project has been and how excited I am to have this conversation. And then also, I'll put you at ease that we'll delve into his creative life to such an extent that an introduction will be made over the course of the entire program. And so, Brian, how did you come to using light in your practice? What was your starting point?
Well, before we get into that, I just want to say, off of what you were saying about it being a rewarding process, and that goes both ways. And working with Hilliard has been fantastic. They've been so supportive and so on top of things and responsive, and just an absolute pleasure. Ben, Bethany, the whole gang have been really great. So just before we get into my personal life,
thank you,
just
Brian.
wanted to make sure that that was known, and it's very much appreciated. So I guess working with light, I started working with light in high school, actually, in stage crew in high school, and that was my freshman year. I just kind of got thrown into it, and pretty quickly everybody else graduated, and I was just kind of left in charge. And so I kind of started lighting my school plays like by my sophomore year, and I just kind of kept going. I actually studied film in college, and I have a film degree from Bard College, but throughout that whole process, I actually worked in the theater, and I was lighting dance concerts and plays, and it was my work study job, but I kind of did overtime and worked well above and beyond, and just kind of kept going. Once I graduated, I started working in New York City, which is where I'm originally from, and these are actually photos of pieces that most of them, well, actually it's a mix of dance and opera pieces that I've done in the last few years. The one in the bottom right corner, I guess my right, your left, is actually from the ACA with Claire Cook, and the two clearly dated period pieces are operas that I did in Chicago, and the last one is a local dance piece that I did with Gina Hanshy, was the choreographer for.
And so you're still active across the country, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, my primary work is as a lighting designer. I work for performances. I actually do some residential work, some commercial work. I am actually a licensed electrician. And I actually came to Lafayette from New York City with my wife, Kelly, who's here with me, and got a job here in Lafayette working as the tech director for the Acadiana Center for the Arts. That's what brought us to Lafayette. So I did that for about 4 years before I went out on my own and just started my own firm as a designer. So yeah, I work with opera companies here locally in Baton Rouge, New Orleans. I work with LSU quite a bit, and an opera company in Chicago, and several dance companies around Louisiana and elsewhere sometimes.
And so now tell me about dancing with Aurora Borealis. This was a seminal moment.
Mm-hmm. So a couple of years after I left the ACA and kind of went out on my own and was working mostly as an electrician and doing some design work also, something was missing, and I was feeling a little bereft, I shall say. And after a couple of whiskeys, sitting together with my wife one evening, we came up with this concept of applying for a residency at the ACA. And Kelly is a poet and a writer, and she actually wrote this piece, Dancing with Aurora Borealis, and we worked on it together. So it was a group residency or a dual residency, and it's actually about the story of Asherah, who was originally a Canaanite goddess and basically considered the wife of Yahweh in pre-biblical times. So it's the story of Yahweh and Asherah. And Asherah decides in the beginning of this piece that she is leaving Yahweh, and she's done and she's had it, and she's not happy with the way the kids are going. And so Kelly actually was on stage playing Asherah, and we made Yahweh be completely told through as a character of light. So the conversation was completely between a character on stage and the lighting on stage. And we tried to create a language with light. Okay. Do you want me to turn this off?
We'll just pause briefly for a technical difficulty we're experiencing. Yeah.
And I think it was a mixed result of success. I think some things worked well, and some things, it's a work in progress. We'll just say it was a workshop, and we did a lot of experimentation. I think some of it was fantastic, and some of it wasn't.
Well, you know, that's where failure's where we
Absolutely.
discover ourselves.
Absolutely.
I have a Beckett quote in my office that says, fail, fail again, fail better.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was, I mean, this was the first kind of launching of myself, thinking of myself in any way as really an artist since I left college with my film degree. And it was definitely a big turning point for me. And failure was a big part of that, and learning from that and being okay with it was a big part of it.
Well, and so how did that feed into And the Stars Aligned? Because it's you can see a through line, but it's a big transition.
Yes, it is. So, I mean, And the Stars Aligned was, again, it was at the ACA in 2019, and it was an exhibition I had in the vault space in the back, and it was an exhibition of lamps based on constellations. So that was the theme of it, and it was actually inspired by a book whose name I'm going to be forgetting now, so we will move on. But it was a book about light pollution and my fascination with light and my work as a lighting designer and working with not just performances, but working with commercial spaces, residential spaces, thinking about light pollution in cities, and it was something I actually got quite passionate about. And that was the inspiration for this piece and working on it. And I was always fascinated with lamps and lighting as well, and creating my own lamps, and it's something I've always kind of worked on the side and not necessarily took as a serious thing until this piece. And I think Borealis allowed me to think of myself in that way.
That was one of my favorite shows I've ever seen in Lafayette.
Thank you.
And one of the reasons why I wanted to work with you. So up until now, there hasn't been an object necessarily. You know, what you've been doing with light's very transitory,
Mm-hmm.
and you're moving into something more sculptural, more permanent, that doesn't need to be interacted with a performer.
Sure, sure.
So what is that like for you as a transition?
Well, it was terrifying. I mean, as a lighting designer and working in performances and even working residential, whatever it may be, I was never the focus. So I was always the supporting person in the background. I wasn't really seen. I wasn't really paid attention to. And this was a really big step out in that way. I mean, even with Borealis, I could kind of hide behind Kelly for a lot of it, and I did, because that's where I was comfortable. And public speaking, I've gotten a lot better about it, but it still kind of terrifies me. And so this was huge. And there's something that's really magical about the performance and the fact that no two performances are ever going to be the same. And it's this magical moment in time, and it's ethereal, and it goes away. And these are something that's more substantial and more permanent, and they're still around, and I see them around town every now and then, and it's got its own magic, definitely, and I love it for that. But it's different. I don't exactly know how to phrase it. These questions are not the softball questions I thought you were going to give me.
Well, I didn't mean to.
No,
I
it's
didn't
fine.
mean to ambush you at all. Well, we can come back to that because it's a recurring theme.
Absolutely, and permanence and impermanence is definitely something that I think about a lot with regard to my work.
And I feel as though, with the mugshot collection,
Mm-hmm.
you also introduce something where they're very precious as well, where you're getting even smaller in scale.
Mm-hmm.
As you explore things, you can kind of have ownership over. So can you talk us through this as well?
Well, the mugshot collection is they are a series of nightlights that I created. And they are inspired by the mugshots. They're historic mugshots from the Storyville era. They're part of the New Orleans, I'm forgetting the name of the collection, but they're a historic collection. They're actually available through the New Orleans Public Library. And there's a collection of mugshots, and they have all their details and all the information on the back of the mugshots, and you can see them online. And they're all from that era of basically 1890 through 1920, 25. They're fascinating. And I kind of wanted to do something about, again, this sort of idea of permanence and impermanence, and that not everybody should be kind of judged from one moment in their life, and maybe possibly one mistake, or whatever circumstances surrounded how they ended up on those mugshots. And that these people are still people, and they are valuable, and they are worthwhile, and they're beautiful. And so I kind of wanted to honor these people who maybe are in history for the wrong reasons, and not necessarily for their fault.
Well, and so you're all over the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you find inspiration to make these ideas a bit more concrete? Like where do these come from?
A lot of it comes from my own personal interests. They come from things I read, things we talk about at home. I mean, Kelly, in and of it herself, she's a poet and a writer. She's taken a back seat this evening, but she's one of the most creative people I know, and the conversations that we have in our house are endlessly fascinating and often an inspiration. And I don't remember where these came from, but it's the idea of, for me, light is a very ethereal matter to work with, and it's an ethereal, precious substance that is very hard to get a hold of. And I think that's a theme that kind of runs through all my work, is this idea of impermanence, this idea of time and space, and this idea of, I guess, connecting to something bigger than ourselves. And I kind of think of light as that energy that is bigger than ourselves. I mean, for me, a lot of this stuff has a underlying spiritual current that runs through it. And I think that's where, although it feels like I'm all over the place in my own head, these all tie together in their own way.
Well, and so speaking of spirituality, can you walk me through who this is, and then a little bit about your relationship with Psalm 46:10?
That's hilarious that I didn't actually put his name on the slide.
Well, I knew we would cover it. So.
Yeah. Well, this is Father Richard Rohr. He runs the Center for Action and Contemplation, and he's an amazing human being. He's written something like, 30 books or something like that. He is a Franciscan friar, I believe is the proper term. I am actually a raised culturally Jewish human being, so I don't know that much about Catholicism for somebody living in Louisiana. But he is definitely a controversial figure, I would say, within Catholicism. He is not loved by all, but those who do love him think he's fantastic, and I'm one of them. So this psalm, Be Still and Know That I Am God, is one that I was aware of, but I discovered it really as a meditation concept through him and through his talks and his writing. So he talks about be still and know that I am God as a meditation that was actually an ancient Jewish meditation. So it was the idea of using this to kind of be still and focus your energy in front of God. And that's how he kind of phrases it. Be still and know that I am God. And the meditation is that with each cycle of breath that you speak these words, you change the meaning slightly by taking some of the words away. So if you've watched the piece outside, it goes, be still and know that I am God. And then with your next set of breaths, you say, be still and know that I am. And the next set of breaths, you say, be still and know. And then be still. And then the last set of breaths, you say, just be. And it's this idea of just being with God and being still with the energy or whatever it is that you believe God is. And I know we've talked about this, and I know it's actually kind of in my explanation as well, that for me, it's slightly different in meaning. And I actually use this as a meditation. I've used it for years before I did this piece. And for me, it's about not necessarily being still, although that is an important part of meditation, but it's about the part about knowing that I'm God. And for me, knowing that I'm God means knowing that I am one with God, whatever you believe God to be. For me, again, God is kind of represented as energy and light. Light is God to me. So knowing that I am God means I'm connected to that energy, that presence that is all around us and that connects every single one of us, and we are all God. I'm not special by being God. We're all God. We're all connected. We're all the same. And that's where I kind of bring it together. And I think that kind of is a through line again in this idea of constellations, in this idea that we're all valuable no matter what we've done in our history or whatever those moments that we're remembered for does not define our lives. And that is the through line even in the ethereal moments in theater and dance that I hope to capture and let people enjoy and bring depth and meaning to without there being any sort of record of it. And it's just a moment in time that gets to be remembered by people and never again repeated.
You know, I came to meditation about the time we started planning this, but not because of this piece. And I have found this piece to be a nice respite. You know, a good kind of work-related call to calm. Mm-hmm. Because it's on site and I can kind of participate with it in the morning or the evening as I'm coming or going. But speaking of work, you know, I think it's a great opportunity to also kind of talk about the sawdust and the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I'm sorry Bethany couldn't join us for this.
In terms of, she likes you, she was just busy. she's not upset with you.
That's good to know.
But so walk us through the kind of that collaborative process, because, you know, letting go of things is so important to meditation. And in certain points, no one is in control of a creative process like this when there are 3 or 4 people.
Absolutely, which is something I'm very much not used to. I mean, in my work, even if I'm collaborating with other performers and working as a lighting designer for a performance, my section, my design, my work, I am very much in control. And I might have people working for me who are working under it and helping me focus lights or program, but it's very much mine. And I'm very hands-on with everything I do, whether it's electrician work or design work or artistic work. All the constellation lamps were created, designed, built, done by me. I hung them all. I did all of it. And for me to have to kind of hand this off was something that was wildly uncomfortable. And and I'm sure it was quite obvious to you and Bethany as well, because I was trying desperately not to micromanage the whole process. But Bethany, basically, I handed these guys a document, and I printed out all the letters to scale so that Bethany could actually create these boards. She actually routed out all the letters. She did a huge amount of this work before I even arrived, which was fantastic and really kind of crazy. I felt like a rock star.
You are. You definitely are. You know, as we're looking at this, you know, we have on here. You can see, and
can we
also
actually go back one slide? There was one other thing I wanted to say, because about the actual letters, that the letters, and I know how they look on outside and how they look finally, that's actually my handwriting that I created a font with. And I went back and forth through all sorts of different ideas and fonts and scripts and all sorts of things. and nothing really felt right or looked right. And I had this as a font. I made it, whatever, 10 years ago, and some like web thing said, hey, make a font from your own handwriting. And I did it. I never did anything with it, but I had it, and I tried it. And I sent it to Ben, and I was like, I don't know. And he loved it. And he was the one that actually convinced me that this was the right thing. And I'm so glad that I did. And it is the right thing, and it is the thing that feels right, as kind of weird and wonky as it kind of looks at times. But that was part of the letting go as well, of just, I didn't know what the right answer was, and I just threw this out there, and I trusted the team that was working with me to tell me that it was.
Well, you know, as you can see, the blue lights are on, so you're seeing images of the space you're in. So right over my shoulder is the kind of exhibition space Brian's work is in, but it faces outside. And you know, I liked the idea of using a font like Helvetica. You know, it was fine, but in some ways it looked like advertising. And our facade is so clean and so sleek that the personality of the font, I thought, really brought the whole thing together, because you have to contend with the architecture.
Absolutely.
You know, like we had all kinds of discussions about the paint color. Like this particular paint color is a hideous color. But it's the one you can see the least through the window during the day.
Because of the tint of the glass that already exists, that UV tint that's on there, it kind of matches perfectly.
And so it's, you know, when it's not on, when it can't shine, metaphorically and literally, you know, it's more unassuming as a result. And, you know, we had all kinds of conversations about what the work needed. You know, do we black out the blue lights? Do we not black out the blue lights? And you really had to treat the architecture as a compositional space. How did you feel about that? You know, having to take that into account. Is that something you're always doing, working with light, or
It
not?
is, to a certain extent. It is something I'm always doing. I mean, I'm always a collaborator, so I don't get to dictate a lot of things in my work when I'm working with, either if I'm helping somebody light their home's going to be designed how they want it. It's not really up to me. Or if I'm working with a dancer or a theater director or choreographer, whatever it is, I am part of a greater vision. So I am used to kind of that give and take, and I'm usually pretty comfortable with it. I was not as comfortable with it on this, as I'm sure you remember as well. I had to kind of get used to, I really wanted to black out the space, and I was kind of adamant about it in the beginning. And again, I mean, I'm so glad that we didn't. And I'm so glad that it kind of worked out the way it did. And once we kind of wrapped our heads around that, and the color combinations that we came up with, once we knew we were working with the blue light, I think complement each other so well. And there was a lot of kind of figuring things out as we went along. As clearly mapped out as it felt in the beginning, so much of it had to be figured out on site.
Well, and you know, like I was concerned that it would look like the building was malfunctioning if it were blacked out.
Right.
And initially you had wanted uplights to shine up and fill the volume. And
absolutely, I wanted to be able to, the light that's breathing down onto the ground, that white strip of light, if you're actually out there looking at it, that is, and you can actually see it going up and down in this little video clip, it's representing your breath. So that's your inhale and exhale as you're going through the meditation. So as you inhale, the light comes up. As you exhale, the light goes down. And in an ideal world, I wanted to try and figure out how to make that white light wash out the letters so that it would actually fill the space with white light and actually wipe out everything else that was around it. So the letters would just kind of disappear in that way. And the architecture wouldn't allow for that. So we, once again, in the process of the give and take and figuring things out, we figured out, oh, well, if we point it down, it blasts the space so well and kind of creates, it kind of enlarges the piece in a way that I think integrates it well better with the space as a whole.
Well, I agree, and it becomes more interactive.
Absolutely.
Like James Turrell being influenced by his Quaker faith and people coming to the light, you know, I feel like it's synced up with your ideas very much better, actually, because it was participatory. The light was arriving potentially to the people.
Absolutely.
And so you have such a strange path to being a practicing visual artist that, you know, like, this is where our worlds collide, because I see you differently than you see yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I'm going to let you have this part of the conversation, because...
well, you know, I feel like, you know, artists just they gravitate to what they know,
mm-hmm.
and they gravitate to forms that they feel they can convey their message. And they're taking their audience into account there. You know, Dan Flavin, of course, is interacting with architecture, and
mm-hmm.
I was thinking about that, and I'm sure you know his work.
Of course, yeah.
You know, so, but you don't care about these people. You know?
I will say I do not have an art degree. I did not study art history. I mean, I appreciate, and I've actually been around, I mean, I worked in museums for years as well. That's a part of my past as a lighting designer. I actually worked for a company that installed museum exhibitions all around the country and worked as a lighting designer for them. I used to do lighting design for the museum at FIT, and I've worked at the Museum of Natural History in New York. And for 5 years before we moved down to Louisiana, I worked as the lighting designer for a museum called the Rubin Museum of Art, which is based in New York City. It's a Himalayan art museum, and it's actually where I learned about meditation, is through that space. There's a lot of Buddhist art. There's a lot of also just programming things. That's where that whole world kind of opened up to me. So, I mean, I do have some art history and knowledge, and but you're right. I don't think of myself in any sort of lineage or anything of the sort.
Yeah, you're not burdened. What I mean to say is you're not burdened by the fact that these people exist.
That's fair, yeah.
And it's wonderful to see you manipulate materials and have conversations where you're not concerned about your lineage.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Jenny Holzer and Glenn Legg and Keith Saunier,
mm-hmm.
Who was originally intended to occupy this particular space. It's originally from Mamu, and his image is in the lower right corner. And his whole career was built around a moment where he left a gas station casino and saw the neon lights reflecting in a rice paddy. And he has this rich Southern California career that's incredibly important, but they're all just the prairie, and you know, in his mind over and over again. And so while you're informed by them to some degree, but you're not burdened by them.
Sure.
The commonality that I see is how you're concerned with your surroundings. You're interested in, you know, the history of Storyville. You're interested in presenting important ideas to people. You know, and we were speaking about James Turrell earlier.
Mm-hmm.
On the right hand, the two right hand images are James Turrell, and his Quaker faith is very much informed by meeting Quaker meeting
mm-hmm.
as a religious ceremony, and you know, and then Olafur Eliasson, again, people are drawn to light in this really profound way. In grad school, I tried to write my thesis on light sculpture, but I was told it was too niche. And I feel like in 2022, I could do it.
You were just ahead of your time.
You know, and so I like to think about the Eliasson here on the left-hand side as a precursor to us shortly going down and going to the light ourselves with you. So
mm-hmm.
I'm very excited about that. But then the last point of discussion, we'll go back to you and we'll talk a little bit about fixtures.
Sure. Well, this is just a couple of lighting designers that absolutely inspired me, as well as, I mean, I love James Turrell. I've been a fan of his work forever. Olafur Eliasson, amazing. He did I don't know, there's a Netflix show called Abstract. It's all about design and art, and he did a piece for that where at the beginning of his episode, he's just taking a white card and traveling to all sorts of different places around the world and showing how the light outside in wherever Jerusalem is different from the light outside in Oslo, is different from the light outside in Berlin, and he's just showing just how the light reflects off of a white card. He's fascinating. I think he's an amazing human being. So these are, especially the one on, again, my right, is Ingo Maurer. Ingo Maurer was kind of the king for me. He passed away a couple of years ago, Austrian, I believe. He's from Munich, I believe. A lamp designer. And that piece with the dishes is, it's in the Museum of Modern Art, and that's where I first came across it. And it was the first time that I really understood that a light fixture could be used to express emotion, and that you could actually kind of have some sort of deeper meaning within something that is so kind of, to many people, mundane. And it just kind of blew me away, and I think he really set me off on a path more than pretty much anybody else. His is also the butterflies and dragonflies is also his piece. And the dandelion is actually, they're a modern group. They're called Studio Drift, and they're a couple that, if you're not aware of their work, they are active now, and they do all sorts of installations. This is just one little piece that I adore, but they do all sorts of installation work. They've done stuff with drones. They're pretty amazing, and they're kind of on the cutting edge of a lot of things, and I take a lot of inspiration from their work.
Well, before we transition to actually going downstairs and doing a walkthrough and engaging in meditation, I was curious, does anyone have any questions for Brian? Bob
I can
Burrell.
take it.
All right, well, if everyone's being shy, what we're going to do is the audience, oh, you do? Okay.
Okay, so I'm curious, as a child, did you have a fascination? Like, when did this light fixation start?
That's a good question. I would say I started becoming fascinated. Like I said, I started kind of working with it in high school on stage crew, which I would not say it was a fascination there. It was something that I thought was kind of fun and cool. I started taking it more seriously when I started working in college and started lighting dance pieces for my friends in college who were dance majors. That's where I started to kind of see it more as an art form. As a fascination, I think that started probably while I was at the Rubin Museum. I think that's where those connections, when I started studying meditation and learning kind of about Eastern philosophy more, I think that's where those things started to kind of connect for me and become more and more of a fascination. And I think the older I get, the more depth I find in this medium and just in the subject of light. I'm endlessly reading about it. I'm learning about different ideas and concepts and historical thoughts about it. And it's, the more I study it, the more I find there is to learn and think about. So I think it's coming and getting deeper as I age and hopefully get deeper. I don't know if that's true, but hopefully that helps. Yeah.
All right, well, if there are no further questions, the people at home watching AOC are going to see a pre-recorded walkthrough of the meditation. And those who watch that, I invite you to come at your own leisure and see it in person before their show comes down and engage with it, because you know, the authenticity of seeing a work of art and engaging with it in person is no there's no substitute for that. So I encourage you to come down because it's an outdoor piece and it's nocturnal. You can kind of do it at your leisure and not have to engage with anyone. But everyone here, I invite you to come down, and Brian's going to walk us through a cycle of meditation. So thank you so much for coming, everyone.
So So we will start with an inhale, an exhale, and an inhale. And we'll say the words, "Be still and know that I am God." Then we'll inhale, exhale, inhale, and we'll say, "Be still and know that I am." And we'll inhale and exhale. And inhale. And on the exhale, we'll say the words, "Be still and know." And inhale. And exhale. And inhale. And say the words, "Be still." And one more, inhale. And exhale. And inhale. And on the exhale, say the word, "Be." So we will start with an inhale.